Good morning.
Hiya,
Hi there.
it's Brechtje in Inverness here.
Hello, Brechtje. Nice to see you. How are you?
I'm fine, a little bit wet. I cycled to the college and it was snowing.
Oh, well, good for you. That's why I need to get some cycling done as well, but it's usually too windy here at this time of year, so it's okay if the wind's behind you, but not if you're cycling into it. So you've actually got some snow. That's nice. We don't have much here at the moment. It's been wet today, so yeah. So well, I don't know how many. There's I think 6 students altogether. So we'll just wait for folk to jabber in or ring in. I'm not sure if we're going to have all six. Ah, there we go. Sounds like somebody else. Good morning. Who else is out there?
No, hi, this is Shetland, PJDE Primary. I'm in the wrong place.
Right, we seem to be at cross purposes here. This is...
Okay, thank you. We'll bow out.
Okay, nice to see you. I'm a Shetland as well. I'm just along the corridor here.
Thank you.
But not in this context.
Well, it could be an interesting combination of classes there. So, Brechtje, are you Frisian?
Yes, the West Frisian.
West Frisian. Very good. Well, I hope you'll be able to tell us a little bit about Frisian folklore in the course of this module as well. So, if anything occurs to you, or if you've done any reading and it sort of fits in as a comparable example or a contrasting example with anything that we look at, that'd be really interesting. Hang on a second. My Internet Explorer. Okay. Just a second. Something funny happening here. Why is that? Okay. So, do we have anybody else? Mind you, it's only 3 minutes past 9.
Yes, I'm in. I'm here.
Ah, hello there. Hi, Lynn.
Hi.
Good morning to you. How are things?
Very wet in Devon, but no snow.
So you're from Devon. Well, we're almost the opposite ends here of Great Britain.
Oh, yes.
I saw you were on the Celts and Vikings module on Monday, weren't you?
I was, yeah.
Yes, Wednesday rather, yes.
Yeah,
There was
and also the modern history module.
Okay, so we'll be together for 4 hours this morning then.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Well, that's great. I'll just hang on just for a couple more minutes to see if anyone else is going to be jabbering in.
Yeah,
before
it
we get
wouldn't
launched.
let me on. It wouldn't let me on for quite a long time.
I see,
I
right.
think it was
Yeah. Well, it's good you're with us now. And with Jabber, as you know, having experienced it now a couple of, at least once this week, if you have a problem, just ring off and ring back on again. Ah, there we go. I see another face.
Hello.
Hello there.
Yeah.
Hello, Ross.
Hi. I'll turn the mic off now then.
Nice to see you. Let's have a little look and see who else we might be expecting. just having a little problem here with my Internet Explorer, so just bear with me a second. Right, back on course. Well, I think we'll get started. That's a good 6 minutes for anyone else to join us. Welcome to Creideamh and Freuteries. That always created a bit of a laugh in the UHI. It's the most unpronounceable of the modules that they offer, apart from the sort of straight Gaelic ones that Salmore has. And many people ask me how to pronounce it. Well, that's it, Creideamh and Freuteries. And it's a combination of Gaelic and Shetland dialect. So Creideamh is belief, and Freuteries is a word used in Orkney and Shetland to mean sort of funny superstitions. Okay, so it's a sort of way of trying to bring two of the stuff, the two of the elements that we'll be looking at in the module together in the title. So, what we're going to do today is I'm going to introduce the module. I'll have a quick run through what you can expect, and then we'll look at the materials that are available for your own exploration of this subject online. And then I'll launch into the first seminar, which I hope will bring it all to life for you. Excuse me. Ah, hello there. Douglas. Nice to see you. Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from a place called Strahan in Argyll.
Argyll. Okay, great, lovely. Nice. Good to see you.
I think I've probably come into the wrong course, actually, or the wrong...
Oh, that's okay. You can. What course are you on?
I'm doing the first year of the BA in Theological Studies.
Okay, yeah, you're on the wrong course, but if you want to hang around, feel free. Right. Well, you'll have to contact VC Master and get the code. I don't know why the code has been mixed up there. So.
Yeah, this was the code I used on Wednesday, and I thought I'd try it again. There wasn't.
Yes. No, the codes change over time, so
yeah.
For the different modules.
Okay.
So, well, farewell. Nice to see you.
Sorry about that.
No problem. Okay, right. Lost my train of thought there. Yeah, so what I would like to do then today is introduce you to the subject, and also try and encourage you to explore the online materials that I'm going to introduce you to. We're very lucky when it comes to folklore that a vast amount of stuff has been digitised and put online. And what would be really good, and certainly worked other times that I ran this class, is if people could do some exploration for themselves of the material that's out there, and bring it to the table each week. So it gives you the opportunity to explore a subject that is of interest to you, to do a bit of research for yourselves, and also to not just sit back and listen to what's coming out of my mouth. And I think you'll be surprised about the nature of the material that we have available. I don't know why folklore has been sort of at the head of the queue to digitise stuff, but I think we can honestly say that they have. And it means that from the peace and quiet of your own house, you can have the whole of Scottish traditional custom and belief there for your own exploration. Okay, now before we start, has anyone done folklore, or has anyone got an interest in this, or imagine they have an interest in it?
Years ago, when I was doing my postgraduate studies in African studies, I looked at quite a lot of West African folklore, but only West African.
Well, that's very interesting. What I found when teaching this before, people who've had either come from a foreign country or had lived and had a sort of interaction with a different society often can bring comparative material or contrasting material to the discussion, which really kind of opens things out. So please feel free if there's stuff that you that you'd like to sort of throw into the discussion about African folklore or culture. Please feel free to do that.
Yeah, what I was most interested in was how folklore and stories particularly got over to the Caribbean during the slave phase, and what changed in the stories and what stayed the same, and then how they got to the southern states of America as well.
Fascinating. Yeah, so things like Brer Rabbit and things like that.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I look forward to that. Good stuff. Now, who else would like to say something?
It's not strictly relevant, but I've got a degree in religion, and I've been based in Sweden for God knows how long, over 10 years, and I've been looking at quite a lot of the connection between historical ideas about the past and, for instance, there's a midsummer festival in Sweden, and there's a lot of national romanticism mixed in with that, and people do say that it's an old pagan custom. I suppose it's a little bit like the idea in the UK with the May Day festivals, that people aren't really sure where a lot of the practices come from. And it's probably maybe from the 1800s, but people do say that there's a lot of vestiges of much older traditions, but there's not necessarily a lot of proof evidence for that.
Well, that's highly relevant, just on a comparative basis, but also one of the themes that we'll be following is the folklore of Orkney and Shetland, which has a Nordic origin. So material from Sweden is, I think I mentioned some of it later on, and certainly stuff from Norway. So if you can contribute on Swedish folklore, on the sort of liminal festivals like Midsummer, that'd be great. And also, you've already pointed out the influence of national romanticism on the developing of tradition and the creation of festivals. That's highly relevant too. So excellent. So we're going to have some good discussions, I think. And we have Brechte there as well in Inverness.
Yes. What was the question? Was it why we chose it, or?
Yeah, it was sort of why and what you already know, I suppose.
I've had some other modules that were similar to this one, but that's, I think, in my first or second year of my previous course. But I also find it quite interesting to see the links between the other cultures. And sometimes you've got like something like Santa Claus. It exists in lots of countries, but it's always slightly different. And so I think it's quite funny how it changes per area.
Yeah. Indeed, and you come from West Frisia, don't you?
Yep, it's in the western province of the Netherlands.
Excellent. So I'm sure you'll have lots of comparative stuff to tell us. So that's good. Well, I think we're going to have a lot of fun. We've got some various interests there from different perspectives. The only problem here is I've got one big screen in this room instead of two, so you're all tiny. You're little cubes up in the corner. So you'll have to speak up regularly. Otherwise, you just look like sort of little ornaments on the mantelpiece. So please don't just sit back. Contribute. And like in every class, if you're not speaking, just keep your microphone off. But when you have something to say or a question to ask, just turn your microphone on and we'll hear what you have to say. Right, okay. Well, let's get started then. I hope you've had a little chance to look at the blackboard. Just about everything we need is there. As I say, folklore, lots of stuff is online, so there's plenty of scope for you to do the exploration from your own house. And in the learning resources, it gives you an idea of the scope and the range of things that we're going to look at. There are more, at least I think there are more topics than there are weeks. So that means that we can sort of pick and choose a little bit and see how far we get. But if there's material in it, you can actually look at it yourself as well. But I felt I had to do the whole range, and just because we have 12 weeks of teaching, doesn't mean that there's only 12 subjects in the whole of the folklore and tradition of the Northern Isles and the Western Isles and the Highlands. So there's plenty there to look at, the whole range of different types of traditional custom and belief and folklore in a more general sense. Okay. And if we look at the learning resources for today, what I put in was as many of the online sources as I thought you could cope with in one go. Today, I want to introduce these to you and just give you plenty of reading material for the future. So there are links to online material about the Gaelic tradition in custom and belief, and also the Northern Isles, or the sort of Nordic strain. And I think I'd like to think of this as a bit of a tapestry that we're going to look at in this module. And there are these different sort of bits of thread that are going into this tapestry. And the two main ones are the Celtic tradition and the Norse tradition in custom and belief. Because we're lucky in Scotland that we have both of these threads. We have quite a, well, all folklores I suppose are unique in some way, but Scotland is lucky that it has these two different strands. So, just to give you some idea, if you want, one of the things that we'll be dealing with quite a lot is ritual, and the rituals that people practice, both in their everyday life and at special occasions, either through the course of the year or the course of their life, or rituals that they practice for averting evil or curing disease. So one of the things that would be useful for you to have a look at first, some reading, is what is ritual? Okay, here we go. From a cultural anthropological perspective. So I'll leave that for you to look at. This is like an online journal with different papers on different aspects of ritual and what ritual means in different contexts. So ritual is fundamental to human life at every level. We ritualize our existence to give it meaning. So have a little delve into that and see what you make of it. In fact, I'd be interested to know what you make of it. If you've read it already, let me know what you think. If you haven't read it already, well, read it for next week, or some of it at least, and see what thoughts it inspires. But it's an interesting look at ritual, because it's not just looking at traditional rituals, it's looking at how rituals have been developed in all sorts of other spheres, and how different communities develop their own rituals that they follow. And I'm sure that you know that in your own life, that if you've been in an office or worked for a company or worked in the health service or whatever it might be, you'll find that when you join, there's a whole lot of rituals and ritualized behavior that you have to quickly learn to become a member of that particular group. So cultural anthropology, this journal on ritual, please have a look and see what you think. Has anyone had a chance to look at it yet? It's okay.
Yeah, I've managed. Sorry, I've managed to plough through a little bit from the second week as well. Yeah, there's a lot of information. And I'm really surprised that it's so well documented. I mean, some of those old sources from the Victorian era, I mean, it's really impressive considering, the Highlands and Islands have always been considered a bit of a periphery. So I'm looking forward to getting stuck into it, definitely.
Good. Yeah, there's you're right that in many ways the Highlands and Islands are peripheral to Scotland, peripheral to the UK as a whole, and definitely peripheral to mainland Europe. But when it comes to folklore and the recording of traditional custom and belief, it's actually quite central. It's one of these places that a lot of work has been done, and has been done from a very early period, and it sort of influenced the actual growth of folklore studies, as we'll see shortly. So, Scotland as a whole is a centre of folklore studies, and the material has been gathered and studied from the Highlands, the Western Isles, and the Northern Isles. That's become part of the corpus. So we're actually quite lucky to be studying folklore and tradition in Scotland, because we're sort of at the heart of that particular study. So I don't know, has anyone had a look at this particular journal yet? If you haven't, that's fine. We'll move on. But if you have a chance to read some of it for next week, that'd be great. There's no problem if you haven't read anything yet for this particular seminar, so I wouldn't worry about it. But I would recommend that you have a read of this for next week. Okay, now, yes, as you said, Ross, some of the old material that's available online is fascinating. So here we go. I've got this to work this time. Let's just see. I had a quick troll through my stuff last night and discovered that some of the links had broken. So if you looked at these a couple of days ago, you might have had a problem with this particular one. But the link should be working now for the first piece of work, downloading. Well, it did work last night. If it doesn't work on this particular computer, well, that's a pity. But it should work on yours. That's Highland Folklore by DJ MacLeod. It's a kind of a summary of... I'll try that again. Here we are. Yes, there we go. It's a summary of Highland Folklore that was written by DJ MacLeod for 3 radio programmes. I think quite early on. I can't remember. I think in the 50s, I think. But it gives you a very nice sort of introduction to a whole range of different themes that we'll be looking at. And it gives you a nice background as well. So if you can try and absorb the Highland folklore, it's not a very huge piece of work, but it does cover a whole range of things that we'll look at. So some of the pre-Christian origins of the traditions that we'll be looking at. So talk on that. Look at the Highland folktales. This is all particularly from the Gaelic perspective, this particular piece. So it looks at the origins of the sort of oral tradition in the Highlands, and a look at the rituals involved with one of the major events in everybody's life, our death. So the death omens and traditions around burial. So it's got a lot of stuff there. And as I say, before yesterday, I had a look and it wasn't there. So the UHI had broken the link. But I'm sure you realise if you go on Google and you look at cached material, sometimes Google has cached it for you. So it's still there. So you can download that and read it. Okay. But as I say, we have 2 threads. We have people on this course who are going to be doing Orkney and Shetland traditional custom and belief specifically, and because of the way that the UHI has worked, we've had to amalgamate. But don't feel left out if you were going to do Orkney and Shetland traditional custom and belief, because it forms one of the pillars of this particular module as well. And we have some good resources for the Nordic strand online, including this, County Folklore Volume 3. This saves you having to buy the book. It has actually been reprinted in paperback, so if you want your own copy and find it a bit awkward reading online, which I know it can be unpleasant, you can find it. You should be able to find it on Amazon as a paperback volume. But the original one, the County Folklore series, it's quite expensive to get the original hardback. And because it was published before, copyright has run out on it, it's been gathered by archive.org and made digitised and put online. And it's searchable when it's online like this as well, which is handy in a way that the paperback version isn't. I'll just check that it's, yes, okay. What should we look up? This might take a while actually, because I've chosen a word that there are many examples of. There we go. So I've just made a search for Trow, which is one of the supernatural beings in the Northern Isles. Trow is the descendant of the old Scandinavian troll, which we all know from Norwegian folklore, the three billy goats gruff and the troll living under the bridge. Well, in the Northern Isles, that traditional being was brought with the Vikings and was maintained its identity in the landscape of Orkney and Shetland. The double L fell off just because L's do that at the end of words that are pronounced by Scots speakers. So when the people moved from speaking Norse to speaking Scots, Thrall became Throw. But they have a huge influence in the traditional belief in the Northern Isles, and you can find lots of examples of them in this book. There we go. Traditional customs to do with the Trows in the winter. So you can search this volume very easily for any interesting things that you might want to. So this could be something for next week. You might want to bring something out of that has been of interest to you. Feel free, please. Okay. Also, archive.org is worth searching itself, just as a... hang on a second. Yeah, I'm still there. If you go to archive.org, you will find a huge number of digitized books. There we go. Which you can search for, well, whatever you're particularly interested in. You may already know about archive.org, but if you don't, it's one of the best online digitized resources on the web, and all the material is free and legal as well, which is of course something that has to be mentioned, because a lot of the stuff is not, and I try to avoid that, but sometimes we have to do what we can do. Okay. But these are two core ones, if you like, to get a real feeling for the sources for this particular module. MacLeod's 3 talks on the Gaelic tradition and Black's county folklore of Orkney and Shetland. That'll give you a real introduction and feel for the mystery and intrigue of this subject. I'll close that just for a second. Okay, but these are secondary sources, if you like. These have been processed through the minds of experts. This is an extraordinary resource that has been digitised both by the AHRC, the Arts and Humanities Research Council, and EDINA, which is an organisation associated with Edinburgh University, which creates digital material. And this is the digitisation of the handbooks, or the notebooks of Carmichael, who is one of the leading folklorists in the Scottish tradition. He went all over the Highlands and Islands, again this is for the Gaelic tradition, and collected a huge amount of material. Some of that material has been published, but a tremendous amount of it still is in the notebooks and hasn't actually seen the light of day. And that's why it was decided to have this research project to digitise the stuff, to make it available. And I don't quite know how it works, but it's very clever in that you have the photograph of the page on one side, and you have the digitised version that is more easy to read on the other side. It has a huge range of different stuff that can be searched. So there are, songs, folk tales, folk belief, onomastic material, so stories associated with individual places, and all this material. Well, that's maybe an exaggeration. But a lot of this material has since disappeared. He collected it before the old folk died off and took their information with them. And again, it's searchable. So, for example, oops. I did this last night, so let's see, hope it works. There's a Gaelic name, Torkel, from Old Norse, but it's it's Gaelicised. So if we put the personal name Torkel in, we should get we get 3 references to somebody called Torkel. There we go. So we get an image of the notebook and a transcript as well. Some of it's in Gaelic, so if you don't have Gaelic, that's not a great deal of use to you. But it's interspersed with English as well, and sort of summaries and information in English. And it is in sort of shortened form, so sometimes it can be a bit difficult to quite get what he's talking about. But nonetheless, it is the opportunity to read a notebook transcribed from the words of tradition bearers in the Highlands and Islands in the 19th century, before a lot of material disappeared. And I noticed actually that I study place names, amongst other things, and I discovered yesterday that one of the Torkel stories actually gives us the name of the Butt of Lewis as Raunish, and I've never seen that anywhere else before. I hadn't, so I think that was a sort of a new discovery, if you like, in this material, the old original name for the Butt of Lewis. So there's all sorts of stuff in there that is exciting. I suppose it's more exciting if you can work your way through the Gaelic, but nonetheless, don't let it put you off. Put things in and see what comes up. You could be sort of pleasantly surprised. But there's an enormous amount of material there which still hasn't been researched or digested, but it's all there online for researchers to access. Okay. What else do we have? Well, there's been another digitisation process being carried out by the National Library of Scotland. Excuse me, I'm going to have to... But for our purposes, what they also have is a huge collection of sort of unusual books that have been donated to them over the past several hundred years. And the rarer, more unusual books are being digitised at the moment, so that are available online. Again, these are Gaelic books, but still, maybe you have Gaelic. Does anyone speak Gaelic or read Gaelic out there amongst the 3 faces that I can see on the screen?
No. Some Welsh. Not
Some Welsh,
Gaelic.
well. That's good though. Okay, well, if you can read some Welsh, maybe you could bring some Welsh comparative material. Have a look at some of that as well. Okay, well, it's not a problem not having Gaelic, but what I've used is I've used some of this material to provide examples, and I've translated it, so don't worry too much. But it's just to show the range of digital material that is out there available to people. Okay. Now, what else have we got? Oh yes. Actually, that one should be in Gaelic and English. Hold on a second. Yes. Yeah, that's why I've forgotten why I chose this particular one as an example, and that's because it's got the Gaelic and it's got the English as well. So this is an opportunity to explore folklore and traditions about the fairies in Gaelic tradition. These are, again, folk tales that were collected and then they've been translated. So there's a lot of interesting material in there for you to delve into and dig about, because the fairies and supernatural beings keep appearing in this particular module. It's not that I'm particularly, I suppose I'm quite interested in the fairies and the different traditional beings, but that's not the reason. It's just that they do feature a lot in traditional custom and belief. These sort of sub-deities, if you like, that despite the fact that people became Christian at an early date in the Highlands and Islands, they maintained a belief in beings that came from their earlier tradition that weren't actually mentioned in the Bible, but they found a way of sort of accommodating them in their traditional belief. So there's lots of material about supernatural beings of different sorts, which we can all sort of put into this folder, the fairies. So we'll talk about them quite a lot. So if you want to sort of delve into that type of material, give yourself a head start, then please have a look at this particular volume. The stories are interesting and they're fun, so it's not onerous, shall we say, to read that stuff. Okay, yes, this stuff as well. Now, online, of course, you'll be confronted by all sorts of material, and when you're doing your pieces of work, when you're doing the two essays, you'll be searching for material. And that's, I suppose I should mention, please discuss with me beforehand what you want to do, and we can, generally people come up with great ideas and there's not a problem. But I mean, if there's something slightly unusual that you want to do, please have a discussion with me, and I'm sure we can fit it in, and you'll be able to do it. So if there's something comparative you want to do, great. There's something specific on a particular aspect of folklore, excellent. Or a strange ritual that you've heard about, or even a ritual that's developed recently, get in touch with me and we can have a chat. But as I say, because a lot of you are doing this online, you'll be finding your information online. So most of the information you'll find is good, but you will find information that's been put on second, third, fourth hand, and sometimes it develops in the telling in a sort of folkloristic way itself. So be careful about the sources that you look at online, because people have different perspectives and they do it for different reasons. So just be a little bit careful about your online stuff, and if there's a source that you're not too sure about, again, just contact me and I'll have a look at it and see if it's kosher. But sometimes you find something that you think might be a bit odd because it's perhaps put on by a neo-pagan or something. But sometimes that material is really very good. So this is an example of that. This website is put on by someone who is a sort of Celtic neo-pagan, but it's a very good collection of folklore traditions and material. and again, well worth having a look. Sometimes there's not references, so some of the things are references, but they're not all referenced, so have to be a little bit careful. But nonetheless, a lot of the beliefs and the yearly rituals are well covered on this site. So feel free and have a good delve into that as well. So this particular bit about Samhain divination is very interesting. We're at the wrong time of year, of course. That has all passed. This is Halloween and Samhain, the Celtic New Year. In fact, from the 1st of November, is long past, but we will deal with that in due course. The big ritual event in the Celtic calendar, which is coming up, is St. Bridget's festival, which is coming up on the 2nd of February. So that's something to look into. I wonder if she's got something. She should have something on Bridget here. Let me see. There we go. La El Bridge, the day of the festival of Bridget. So that might be something you want to read up for next week. Have a look at St. Bridget's Day. It was the big festival in the year for women in the Gaelic areas of Scotland, and it's still a big festival in Ireland. And it's still practiced in Barra, in sort of the Catholic areas of the Western Isles as well. It's on the same date as Candlemas, so it became, it's part of the Catholic ritual calendar as well. But it was definitely a day dedicated to women, when women celebrated being women, and childbirth and breastfeeding and all sorts of things. So it was a very important female festival, and it's a pity really that it's kind of petered out over the last 100 years, because it was sort of fundamental to the traditional society for thousands of years, if you like. So have a look at that, and this is a good bit on this website. I must say that the person who's put all this together is very dedicated. So it's she's a follower of sort of Celtic Reconstructionism. So she wants to have a sort of neo-pagan religion, but it has to be based on, as the sources have to be as good as possible, as it were. So there aren't flights of fancy. It's a well-constructed site. So again, enjoy having a look at that. And so La El Bridge for next week. Have a look at, see who St. Bridget was, because it's an intriguing tale. Okay. Brecht, what's the origin of your name?
It means the same as the English bride or the Scottish Brecht.
So it's Bridget, is it?
Brechtje.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's the same as St. Bridget.
I don't know what Bridget means, but what does Bridget mean then?
The Gaelic form Bridget originally meant the sort of the high one, actually, the sort of the great one. I don't know if Brecht means that, but that's why not? That sounds good. But we'll look into that. We'll look into the etymology of your name and see if it has the same etymology as Bridget. I'll try. That's my homework for next week. I'll try and have a look at that. Where are we? Okay, now I'll get on to the seminar just briefly, just in a minute. But one of the things that I do mention in my talk, is Fraser's Golden Bough. Now, this is an extraordinary piece of scholarly work. Why am I at the back of the book? Hang on a second. Get to the front. There we go. this is one of these fundamental books that lies at the heart of a discipline. In fact, lies at the heart of several disciplines. The Golden Bough by J.G. Fraser is a collection of a gigantic amount of stories from all sorts of different traditions and folklores. And J.G. Fraser was a classicist who was trying to explain. He wanted to explain to himself. I can't remember exact details, but it's about mistletoe. That's what the Golden Bough is, and there was a reference to mistletoe and some events taking place in a sacred grove outside Rome, and he wanted to try and explain to himself what this reference was. Oh yes, it was the king of the grove. I remember now. There was supposed to be somebody who was the king of this grove, and he could only be replaced by someone who would come and kill him and become the new king of the grove. And mistletoe was associated with this in some strange way. And he wanted to explain why this used to take place, why this figure representing the grove could only be replaced by someone who killed him and took his place and all this. So anyway, what he did by looking into this, he actually created, in some ways, the science of folklore and the science of social anthropology, because it's a gigantic book, and it's, for our purposes, it's just something to delve into, because if there's any sort of strange ritual or traditional custom that you want to find comparative examples, it's likely to be in the Golden Bough. He spent years writing this. It's not just one volume; it's a whole, it's a many volume work. And of course, it's sort of gone out of favour in folklore studies and in social anthropology now, because it's seen as dated and old-fashioned. But that's often what happens for a seminal work at the sort of core of disciplines. But it's still an extraordinary piece of scholarly research. It's easy to read. It's humorous, which is something you don't often find nowadays in scholarly works. And it's full of all sorts of intriguing material. So let's see, what can we find? Let's see, a reference to... This is from the 2-volume version. I say there are many volumes in the original form. So there we go. In the Highlands of Scotland, the revival of vegetation in spring used to be graphically represented as follows. On Candlemas Day, the 2nd of February in the Hebrides, the mistress and servants of each family take a sheaf of oats and dress it up in women's apparel, put it in a large basket and lay a wooden club by it. And this they call Brude's bed, so breeches bed. And then the mistress and servants cry 3 times, Bridget, breeches come, breeches welcome. This they do just before going to bed, and when they rise in the morning, they look among the ashes, expecting to see the impression of Breeches club there, which if they do, they reckon it a true presage of a good crop and prosperous year, and the contrary they take as an ill omen. So, there's Highland material in this book. It actually goes on for quite a bit, but he's putting it in the context of comparing it to, before that, African, Russian, English, French, all sorts of other traditions. So it's always a good place to go to first if you wanted to look something up and find comparative material. Have a look at the Golden Bough. And as I say, if you have time to read it, because it's a huge weighty tome, you'll enjoy it because it's good fun. It's full of all sorts of interesting stuff. Okay. Now, one of the questions that we could ask, but we will ask, what is folklore? What is it we're actually studying? And where else has folklore? And the answer to some of these questions and the different elements within this big sort of encompassing set of folklore can be found here on this wiki. So have a look at that if you have a chance as well. For folklore, we're just we're looking specifically at traditional custom and belief, but we look at other aspects of folklore as well. Traditional stories, supernatural superstitions, poems, all sorts of things which are within this bigger branch as well, to feed into trying to understand traditional custom and belief in its in what it means in Scotland. So, but folklore is a big thing. In some ways, folklore is has been defined as a tradition or an idea or a phrase that's shared by two people or more. You know, so might come back to that later on. But it's pretty much anything that's shared by a group of people to do with belief or behaviour or sayings or anything oral tradition that's shared between people. So it's a huge subject, and there's room for everybody in it, and room for people to chart their own path through it and to find new material that others haven't researched. So it's an enormous, amorphous subject. But we will try and keep it focused as much as possible on traditional custom and belief. But please have a look at that. It's an interesting website. We also have Open Folklore, which is a website organised from America, from the American Folklore Society, which also produces lots of material that you might like to have a look at. So enter your keywords in there and see what you can find. Okay, right. Let's just have a look. What I'd like to show you now, just in case you haven't found your way to finding these, UHI has a lot of online material and journals for you to look at. In fact, you're lucky now, because if we tried to do this course, I don't know, 10 years ago, or 20 years ago definitely, it would have been impossible, because a lot of this material could only be got from libraries physically. So you either have to be present in a place or get stuff sent out to you, which would be interminable. You know, it would take too long. We're benefiting now from technology. I know sometimes technology is a pain in the neck, but we wouldn't be able to actually run this course without the fact that we are living in 2015 and have the ability to access this material. And UHI has, sometimes it doesn't spend a lot of money, but it's spent quite a lot of money making sure that it has access to online journals and signing up for, in particular for our purposes, JSTOR. So JSTOR has 27 folklore journals on it. That's not individual journals, that's subscriptions to the whole of these particular journals. So you can search through them for all their papers. And I'll show you how to get onto it just in a second. But amongst the most exciting of the journals that we have access to is Biologius, which is the journal of the Irish Folklore Society. Now, and commonly Biologius Éireann, the Folklore of Ireland Society. Ireland is like Scotland's older brother when it comes to folklore studies. Now, I've said Scotland is sort of central to folklore studies and, you know, not peripheral in any way, and that's true, but Ireland is even more central to it, because one of the things that the Irish state wanted to do when it was creating Irish identity after, when it got independence, was to promote Irish culture and Irish language, and to support Irish folklore studies, because that was seen as central to Irish identity. So there's been a huge amount of Irish folklore studied and gathered, and also, of course, there was a huge opportunity to do it. I mean, it existed. Didn't have to make it up. I mean, Irish rural society had a huge amount of folklore and tradition in it, so it was possible to collect. And the journal, as they associated with this great effort to collect this material, is Beologius, which basically means something like sort of oral tradition. And the reason for looking into this is that the Irish were quite Catholic in their outlook, because they looked at Scotland and other places as well. So they looked at Gaelic Scotland and sort of compared that material with the Irish stuff. So you'll find Scottish material in Beologius as well as Irish material. And you'll also find stuff collected in Ireland that is highly relevant to trying to understand what was happening in Gaelic Scotland, because it comes from the same cultural tradition. So you'll find lots of stuff there. Another good journal is Folklore, which is the one of the earliest of the English language journals on folklore, and the coverage is from 1890 to 2007. So there's a lot of stuff in there. You'll find stuff about Scotland, about the Northern Isles, plenty of good material, and Western folklore as well. Now, if you were to spend the next few years delving into all this, you still probably wouldn't have a chance to read all the stuff that I've just introduced you to here, but it will be an opportunity for you to have a look at it yourself and find bits and pieces that you're interested in. Okay, so how do we find JSTOR then? If you haven't already found it. Well, first of all, you have to go onto the UHI side. And you would go on as a student, I go on as staff, for the moment anyway. Now, and then we find the library tab. Okay, and you can look for journals on the eJournal Gateway, but in fact, for JSTOR, which has all these things collected anyway, go on to electronic resources. And there, eJournal Gateway is one possibility, or A to Z online resources. That's the one for us. And we go to J. And there we go. Scroll down a bit, and there's JSTOR. And then you sign in with your normal username and password. And miraculously, JSTOR opens, and then you can look for the journals. Okay. There we are. 5 seconds. A few extra presses that you shouldn't have to do, but there we go. But there's Beologius anyway, online, all the way back to the 1920s. And it's searchable. Just to give you a flavour of the sort of thing that there exists in it. Okay. You have to accept their terms and conditions, which means don't print it off and print hundreds of copies of it and send it round different folk. Come on then. I think there's something wrong with this particular computer. Ah, there we are. Okay. So, dust and ashes, sweeping the souls in Celtic countries. So again, it's one of these, I don't know why I've chosen, that's the second time or third time death has turned up in this particular talk. But anyway, there are lots of rituals to do with death, and this one is a comparative study. I haven't read it, I confess, but I will after today. So, it seems it's doing Brittany. Interesting. Okay, yeah, definitely. Hold on a wee second. Primarily about Brittany, this one, I think. Where's the comparative bit? Oh no. There's a comparison with something that happens in Wales. And Ireland. Okay. Sweeping out the ashes with the souls of the dead. Okay, very interesting. So we'll have to see if there's anything from the Highlands in there. I'm not sure. But, you know, that's what's so good about this site. You find stuff that you haven't had a chance to read in the past, and it's all there for you. And it's much easier to search than actually, you know, going to a library that has this journal. So, please have a look at that. St. John's Eve, there we go. Now, you're talking about midsummer in Sweden. That's St. John's Eve. And there are fire festivals in other places as well at midsummer, including Ireland. And in fact, in the north of Ireland, bonfire night is not Guy Fawkes night. It's actually midsummer. So, and there were midsummer bonfires in Scotland as well until the Kirk put its foot down and tried to stamp the fires out, as it were. So, a fantastic resource, and sometimes you perhaps don't realise what material UHI has available for you there. But please look at JSTOR and some of the other collections of journals as well, and see if you can find anything that takes your fancy. But I would recommend having a look at Biologias. In fact, if you want to sort of, I say, bring something to the discussion over the coming weeks, Biologias is a good place to find things that you might want to have a chat about. Okay. Let's get some of these. Alright, hang on a sec. But as you'll see, there's no shortage of stuff. But don't be overwhelmed. It's not to sort of make you think, oh my God, how am I going to read all this? It's just to present it as a landscape that you can traverse yourself. And you can find the things that are relevant to your particular interests. And find things, of course, that are relevant to the discussions that we should be having each week on different topics. But don't feel like some people do when you see a mountain of material that puts you off. You think, oh, I'll never be able to read all that. That's not the point. Of course you'll never be able to read it all. It's just it's stuff that you can explore and find material of interest. And it's better to have lots of stuff to be able to explore than to have a shortage and feel that you don't have access to the same material that you would have if you were, say, in a university like Edinburgh or Oxford, or where that you could actually go to the libraries. You don't actually have to do that anymore. Okay. Right, so that's the materials. Any questions about the materials then? Or any questions so far about anything? It's okay, you can say no. Turn on your microphone.
I'm just amazed at how many resources we've got access to. compared to the 70s when I was.
It's a completely different world. Yeah, it's a completely different world.
Yeah, I mean, I looked on JSTOR and just it's like being in a sweet shop. It's just everything you want.
It is, and it's on so many different subjects as well. So again, feel free to use it for anything that you might be studying or have an interest in. There's so many different journals that you have access to. But yeah, I'm surprised that people don't just, or that the UHI doesn't offer a sort of service for people who are not wanting to do any study. You know, just want to sign on as students to read stuff, to access these things. You know, sort of pay £100 or something like that, and you have access to all the resources that are online of anything that you might be interested in. Actually, that might be an idea I could suggest. But yeah, there is no sort of shortage, and it's really wonderful that the research funding councils have been spending money to allow the digitisation of this stuff. But yeah, good. Well, I'm glad you've had a chance to look at JSTOR already. Okay, any other comments before we go on to something else? Just say hello, just so we know we are still alive.
No questions here.
Okay, that's good. No problem. Excellent. So, right. Okay, now this conked out. This had a problem with my I don't have a PowerPoint for this one. I've got what's the document? I've got an SWF. This was a little system that we tried at one point, which allows you to convert a PowerPoint into a web page and show it on a web page, show it on a browser. So it usually works, but I had a bit of a problem this morning, so we'll see what happens here. Give it a chance to load up. Okay, it's loading up. Right. Well, I think I just want to run through the notes a little bit to sort of reintroduce some of this stuff and fill in the background. So, as I say, we're going to look at primarily the intangible cultural heritage of the Highlands and Islands, both the Western Gaelic areas and the Northern Norse areas of Scotland. Intangible cultural heritage is exactly what it says. You know, it's so we're not looking at pots and bones and all the boring stuff that archaeologists like to look at. We're looking at the intangible stuff, the oral tradition, the stuff that people believe, the stuff that's passed on from one generation to another, the songs that people sing, the funny little ditties that people have in the back of their head, and you wonder, you know, I'm sure you've got lots of them in your own heads, things that you wonder where you got them from, you know, all sorts of stuff, nursery rhymes. In fact, somebody did one of their essays on nursery rhymes that they collected. So there's all sorts of things. That's sort of intangible cultural heritage. It's the stuff we carry around in our heads and share with other people's heads. Okay. And, you know, another term for that is folklore, in the more general sense. Okay. There are other terms that other people like to use, and they're slightly different disciplines, but they are related. If we were studying folklore at the School of Scottish Studies, we'd call it ethnology. So that's the study of ethnos, of people. And it's related, of course, to the study of social anthropology. And in the distant past, at the time of James Fraser, you know, the late 19th century, really folklore and social anthropology were pretty much the same thing, and they come from the same roots. And you know, it's not too silly to suggest that if you're studying your own intangible cultural heritage, then you're a folklorist, and if you're studying somebody else's, then you're being a sort of anthropologist. But these, you know, the social anthropologists, of course, would debate that, and they think their study, their discipline is very much more than just folklore, but there's certainly there's an overlap and a shared heritage between the two. So this is just a little cartoon, just people living a modern life, but when they hear the anthropologists are coming, they get rid of all their modern stuff so they can be studied as a primitive tribe. And it's a bit like that when we're looking at traditional custom and belief. We can be looking at the ancient, unchanging, oral material passed on from the primordial past. But in actual fact, there's more to it than that, because traditional custom and belief includes modern beliefs as well, and more recent traditions that have found their way into people's ritual life. So we're not going to be sticking just to the ancient stuff. We're going to look at more modern material as well. And specifically, we're going to focus, or try to at least, on the traditional customs and beliefs, the religious beliefs, the social activities, both ancient and modern, which still influence people today in the Highlands and Islands. So things, if possible, things that people still do. But we're also going to look at stuff that people did believe and were recorded, because, you know, well, it's interesting. It's not just a contemporary study, but we're going to try and have contemporary stuff in it as well, whenever possible. But we will be going back to earlier days, earlier material, and right back to pagan times if possible, when we can see that that is reflected in recent or current belief and practice. And we're going to base it, this sort of nebulous subject, around two symbolically linked cycles. So, you know, there are other ways of dividing these things up, but I think these are cycles that we all experience, and cycles around which traditional custom and belief has a lot to say and is intimately involved. That's the cycle of life. We don't usually live our lives totally, you know, without belief, without ritual, without customs. That might happen in the future, I suppose, as if we all become sort of atomized individuals sitting in front of our computer screens. But even then, we might have rituals about I suppose we might have some kind of ritual. But generally, if you live in a community or a society, or live in a family, the cycle of life is ritualized and commemorated in various ways. So we're going to look at the cycle of life then, and look at the marriage traditions, birth traditions, death and funeral traditions, and their origins, if we can find them. Just see what happens in the Highlands and Islands to commemorate these various coming sort of rites of passage that people go through in their in this sort of trip. I don't know why it's a cycle, actually. It's a cycle because individually it's not a cycle unless you believe in reincarnation. Individually it's just a straight line, isn't it? So you get, you know, you go from one thing to the next, and then you fall off the edge. But it's generally thought of as a cycle because the next generation go through the same processes. And over time these things change, but we do tend to ritualize and commemorate these rites of passage. And we seem to have done that all the way back for as long as we've been human. At least that's what the archaeologists of the Paleolithic past tell us. People have always been ritualizing these things. That's why you find burials from, say, 30,000 BC or even earlier, with evidence of people carrying out a ritual to bury the dead. In fact, burial itself is a ritual. You don't just leave the body where it died, as it were, for the natural processes to take place. You know, you stick it in the ground or stick up a tree or whatever your particular ritual is. People have done that. So there are these things that we'll look at, and all societies seem to do it. So that's one of these cycles. The other one is the cycle of the year. And that definitely is a cyclical thing that we experience. So we'll look at how in the Highlands and Islands, we'll look at the various calendar festivals that are used to mark time, and also how these festivals are liminal periods between one bit of time and the next bit of time. And liminality is a concept that we'll come back to time after time. It's perhaps easier to understand just by looking at examples of it rather than coming up with a dictionary etymology. But really what it is is from limen, the Latin word for a doorway, and you go from inside to outside, and by going through the doorway you are affected in some manner or other. And if you look at the year, the festivals mark doorways between different sections of time, and they're commemorated and they're ritualized. So these liminal periods tend to have rituals associated with them. And also, not only that, there seem to be times that are there are sort of times outside of time, if you like, and because of that they're associated with, as we'll see, the other world, and the other world is a place of danger. So there's usually rituals associated with averting danger in some way. We tend to think of some of these things as just celebrations for some reason or other, but they're also, traditionally at least, associated with averting some kind of danger that you get at that time between one period of time and the next. And the same liminality you find in the ritual of life as well, in the cycle of life, because what tends to be ritualized is the going from one state to another. So you go from being inside your mother to being born. So that is a kind of liminal period. You go from being a child to being an adult, and that particular event is ritualized, and it's a sort of outside of everyday experience. So then it's connected to the other world again, so it's a dangerous period. So there are, the word is apotropaic. Apotropeia is the doing of something to avert danger. So there's what you find in the rich cycle of life. You find direct parallels with the cycle of the year. So these things. It's a way of what's the word? It's a way of giving the life and year a meaning as well. So giving it a sort of giving it meaning. We love as human beings to give things meanings, even if we don't understand what those meanings might be. But we tend to not just to like a dog or whatever pass through life or pass through the year without any really understanding what's going on. We like to mentally have a meaningful map of what's going on. So we'll look at these different festivals, both the Gaelic ones and the Norse ones, and look at their origins and look at rituals associated with them. I have to say, at the moment, we won't be able to do huge depth of these things because there are so many of these festivals. So we're looking in a general sense as to what was going on. And we'll also look at one of the sort of ideas behind these ritualized events, and that's magical thinking. So we'll come to that next week. It's a sort of magic. It's a non-modern way of thinking, because these apotropaic rituals, these avoiding of danger, involve magical thinking. So we'll come back to that next week. But first of all, we've been talking already. Why does my notes say first of all? Let's have a little word about folklore as a whole, and just show where Scotland fits into that. Until the Romantic period, really, folklore wasn't really seen as anything, well, sort of worth studying. There were some antiquarians who collected sort of bits and pieces of interesting material from the lower orders but it wasn't really seen as a subject worth studying until the rise of Romanticism, and more definitely with the growth of nationalism in the 19th century. Prior to that, so during the period of Enlightenment, it didn't really feature as of any great interest. The word folklore itself, we think it looks very old. We think, wow, that's an ancient word. Well, it is made up of two old words in English, the folk and lore. It's like straight out of Tolkien, isn't it? Folklore. But in actual fact, it's not an old word. It's a neologism created by William J. Toms in 1846. And it replaced popular antiquities. So there were people interested in sort of bits and pieces of oral tradition, but it was, popular antiquities. It's like something you might find on the back page of a newspaper, sort of funny stories from such and such a place. But William J. Toms thought it should be taken more seriously and created this word in English. Now, he created it sort of copying the German usage. And he used folk to mean the common people, and lore, culture sort of handed down orally. And it opened a whole range of different words that you'll find in the dictionary that again seem old but aren't. And I've got they're on the notes there. But you would be surprised to know that folk dance, for example, is only first recorded in 1912. So it's not an ancient study, this. But Toms himself, although he came up with the word and sort of gave it gravitas, he was influenced by some Scots who were interested in preserving the culture of Scotland. And there we have at the top of the page Walter Scott himself, who is a fundamental figure in Romanticism, in creating the romantic novel, not the romantic sort of Barbara Castle type novel, but not novel about the past and about romantic ideas like Middle Ages, etc. So he was interested in ballads and stories from the borders, and he collected them, along with James Hogg, who was a great, one of Scotland's greatest authors actually, not such a great poet, but a great author, and he was a shepherd in Ettrick in the borders. So he was a man who actually knew a lot of these stories and traditions from growing up with them. And then, of course, there's Robert Burns, who wasn't just a great poet of the people, but he was also a collector of ballads and traditions. So there's right at the sort of beginning of an interest in these things, you find three leading Scottish literary figures being involved in collecting this stuff. They were sort of one strand in Tom's creation of the term. The other one was the influence from German Romantic philosophers of the late 18th century. In particular, Johann Gottfried von Herder, who was the philosopher of Romanticism, if you like. There's a lot more could be said about this, but he was the one who was against the philosophical sort of norms of the Enlightenment. He wasn't so keen on reason or universalism, and was more interested in glorifying the knowledge and of the ordinary people. Okay, and he thought that their cultural expression was more important and richer and more meaningful than the learned culture and literature of the previous period. So he actually came up with a sort of dialectic discussion about the value of the Kultur des Volkes against the Kultur der Gelehrten. So the culture of the people against the learned culture. And there we have the use of the word folk, which Toms picked up on from that German root. It was an English word, of course, but it wasn't really used very commonly at that point. But he generally picked that as a reference to von Herder. Von Herder was also the the philosopher of nationalism as well. It's from him that you start to get this idea that the language and the culture of the people is important, and the people are important, and they should have their own nation. You know, they were a nation, but they should have their own state. So that sort of developed from this period as well. I say in the notes that he probably wasn't nationalistic in a chauvinistic sense, just non-elitist. They didn't like sort of elite culture that had developed previously. But nonetheless, his promotion of folk culture and folk belief is at the heart of the growth of nationalism in the 19th century. And you'll find that when people were creating their national identity in the 19th century, they returned to the folklore of the people, of their people. This was what they used to identify themselves and to build their identity. And you'll find folklore is sort of central to this nation-building enterprise in, maybe not in all countries, but certainly you find it in Germany, and you find it in Finland, and you find it in Ireland, and didn't really happen in Scotland because Scotland was happy being part of the empire and thriving at that point. But interest in folklore, of course, was still great in Scotland, but it wasn't really used as a vehicle for nationalism. But definitely, for example, if you look at Finland, Finnish folklore is fundamental to the creation of the Finnish identity and the making it different from Sweden and different from Russia. Of course, in 1817, 1814, Finland, which had been part of Sweden for hundreds of years, became part of Tsarist Russia. So there was a kind of onus on the Finns to develop an identity that was distinctive from the Russian. And despite the fact that many people at that point spoke Swedish in Finland, they didn't really want to build on that particular aspect of their identity either. So they, the great literary figure who you see there, Elias Lönnrot, Lönnrot, other way around, he collected oral poetry from the outlying parts of Finland and Karelia, and built the Kalevala on the basis of that, which was there's a sort of, I don't know what you would call it, a national epic of the Finnish people, and was fundamental to the creation of Finnish identity, and led ultimately to Finland's independence in 1917. It had built up such an identity that they managed to escape from Tsarist Russia when Russia had its revolution. And you'll find, the material that Lönnrot collected, it's Sibelius used it as inspiration for lots of his music, and other Finnish writers used it, and it influenced folk art, well, not folk art, but the national art of Finland included lots of references to the Kalevala. Hello, is that somebody wanting to say something?
I was just thinking of Wagner's operas in Germany,
yes,
using folklore and the ring cycle or Meistersinger.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. The Nibelungenlied, although it was a medieval epic sort of written text, it was used in a similar way, and combined with Old Norse Volsunga Saga by Wagner to create a sort of a huge national, not an epic as such, but the ring cycle, the sort of dramatic, a dramatic epic, shall we say, a musical epic. You're absolutely right. They didn't use sort of, well, they used, if you want a sort of comparison with the use that Sibelius made of the Kalevala stories, you could probably look at Gustav Mahler's Lieder, because he used poems that were supposedly traditional folk poems what they called the songs of a wayfarer. I've got a collection of them. Anyway, there were traditional poems that were collected in southern Germany and in Bohemia, and he used them as a source for his Lieder, which then became a source for his symphonies. So you'll find German composers and people of the Germanic tradition, at least he wasn't a German, using folk material as well in their compositions. So folklore was very important, and unfortunately, of course, it could have some bad ramifications, shall we say. The Nazis were great supporters of Volkskunde and the innate superiority of German folklore as they saw it. So it was used by people who wanted to build a nation, who wanted to identify their nation, and who wanted to separate their nation off from other people. So that's one of the reasons that folklore has gone out of popularity in certain places, because of this sort of association, these connotations of why would you want to collect this stuff anyway? What are you using it for? Why are you saying our folklore is distinct and different from everybody else? What's superior about our folklore? So there is a sort of there's a cloud hanging over certain aspects of folklore studies, shall we say. However, there is another tradition in folklore studies, folklore not being used to define the particular and the nation, and that's more looking at folklore as a way of understanding human beings in general, and comparing the folklore of one place with another place, and seeing if by comparing it you can pull out general sort of rules, not quite the right word, but general themes. So why do people have rituals when children become adults? Why do they do that? Why do they commemorate it? What's the thinking behind it? And this more general look at folklore as a resource to understand human beings is one of the origins of social anthropology, and it's also a way of looking at folklore that some particular scholars have followed. So James Fraser, he was one of these ones who instigated the study of folklore from that perspective. And nowadays, that's really the basic. The folklore scholars of today tend to be more looking at folklore cross-culturally rather than as individual national categories. Of course, it's interesting to look at national categories or areas within nations as well, because that's where you get specific, interesting and unusual things taking place. But it's also interesting to look at it in a more general sense as well, because then other things stand out, and you get a better understanding perhaps of human behaviour, which is intriguing as well. So modern scholars, there's quite a lot of American folklorists, they're the ones that look at this more generally. I mean, they'll look at the folklore of the Appalachian Mountains, these great repositories of folklore and tradition in the States, like the Ozark Mountains and things like that, where people went across from Britain 300 or 400 years ago and maintained traditional customs that subsequently died out. So that's very intriguing. But as I say, they tend to be put in a more into a wider picture. So Alan Dundas, he's well worth looking up if you want to do some exploration of more modern folklore scholars. Then have a look at Alan Dundas. And the reason that we've got this strange picture is that he's been a scholar that suggested that folklore should be studied very generally and in a very widespread manner. So he includes latrinalia as folklore. And of course it is. This is what, when you go into a toilet, public toilet, and you read what's on the inside of the toilet wall. It's usually, well, it can be specific stuff, but it's also, you get general stuff that people pick up and they write in the next toilet that they go into. So this is folklore as well, and this actually has an ancient tradition, because you find latrinalia in Roman toilets as well. So there's a continuity there. People can't help themselves, these are strange little things. And I won't give examples, but I'm sure you've probably seen them yourself. I'm sure popping into your head at this moment are little latrinalia pieces of folklore that you have seen and being shocked by or enjoyed over the last few years. So that is also folklore. So if anyone's interested in studying the latrinalia of Orkney and Shetland or the Western Isles, feel free. If you're down in Devon though, or Sweden, I don't know how you're going to get access to that particular information, but where there's a will, there's a way, I suppose. What else have we got here? Yes, and I've also got a picture of Claude Lévi-Strauss at the bottom. That's because he's one of the leaders of social anthropology. There's been a constant interaction between folklore studies and social anthropology since the very beginning, and as I say, the boundaries between them are blurred. But Dundas was a follower of Lévi-Strauss and his ideas of structuralism. So he applies structuralism to the understanding of folklore. But you can have a look at that for yourselves, and come back to that at some point. Okay, so we said that Scotland had, was there. Scots were interested in collecting this material before the word folklore was coined. Well, once it was coined, Scots maintained an interest in it and have been at the forefront of collecting stuff. And this stuff has come from both the Northern Isles and the Gaelic areas of Scotland too. So we have here a picture of Alexander Carmichael up at the top with his big beard and his hairy sporran and his walking stick. So he's the man that we have that, I showed you the resource online where you can look up his material that he collected from the Gaelic-speaking area. We have Hugh Miller in the middle, who was a native scholar. He grew up just north of Inverness, and he was a stonemason and a Baptist and a self-educated man, a very great scholar in his own right, but a self-educated man, and he collected lots of material from the Easter Ross area, and ultimately committed suicide, probably because he couldn't reconcile evolution, which he could see and trace in the rocks. As a mason, he'd found bodies of fish and things in the rocks. He couldn't reconcile that with his fundamentalist Christian belief that he'd grown up with. So he had some sort of intellectual moral crisis, they believe, and he committed suicide. But that's a very jolly story. But he did collect lots of folklore material as well, and he's an excellent writer. And these you can look up on. There was an archive. I just saw a book by him recently online. Where was that now? I'll try and find a book by him that I did find. I think it was just yesterday. I found where he's actually walking through parts of Easter Ross and into South Sutherland and telling stories as he goes, including a story about a man who'd been in Poland in the 17th century and came back wealthy, so people believed, and then he died, but they couldn't find any money in his kist that he had, and then his ghost kept coming back and haunting this particular area to try and indicate to people, I suppose, where his money had gone. So he's got all this sort of interesting traditional material, so I must remember to put that on. Then the large Highland man smoking a cigar, or whatever it is he's smoking, is John Francis Campbell. And he collected a huge amount of material as well, a lot of it from Islay. So that's Gaelic material, but it's been translated. So a lot of traditional stories, longer stories and material from the Gaelic heroic age, actually, that has since disappeared. So stories of the Fáine, or the Fenians, and the ancient Gaelic heroes from a sort of mythic past. So, yeah, important. And then the lady down in the left-hand corner is Jessie Saxby, who lived in Shetland. She was a sort of wealthy woman who lived up in Unst, and she was of, well, she considered herself a Shetlander, born and bred, and not a Scot, but a Shetlander, and she collected lots of material, folklore material from Shetland, and published it in a book, The Folklore of Shetland, in the 1930s, when she was a very old lady in her 90s. But prior to that, she'd written stuff on Shetland before. But you can see there's a sort of tradition of people. Jessie Saxby, John Francis Campbell, and Alexander Carmichael were sort of, I think Alexander Carmichael anyway, were sort of higher status. So these are sort of people of middle class, upper middle class, who were interested in the traditions of the folk that lived around them, and who they, well, I don't know, I was going to say they were slumming it. No, but they were people who were of a higher status than the stories they were collecting, but nonetheless they had a great interest in it. Whereas Hugh Miller was definitely a man of the tradition, as it were. He grew up with the stories that he was recording. And this tradition in Scotland has continued. So the School of Scottish Studies is the place that has done most for collecting Scottish material since the 1950s. And there were some great luminaries who went out with very early recording devices, basically, I suppose, copying the Irish folklore society, and also organising folklore societies in Scandinavia. There was a real crossover between Scandinavia, Scotland and Ireland at this time in folklore studies. And the Scottish scholars went out and collected recordings of Gaelic, lots of Gaelic material, and also came to Shetland and Orkney and collected a lot of material too. And we have people like Hamish Henderson there, who is, regarded as one of the great folklore scholars in the world, not just in Scotland. And he collected lots of material that the travelling folk had to offer, that they'd remembered, as well as Gaelic and Shetland stuff. And we also have John Lon Campbell and Margaret Fay Shaw, and that's Margaret Fay Shaw pictured there, and they collected lots of material from the Hebrides, and in fact bought the island of Canna and tried to establish it as a Gaelic-speaking cultural centre, to not great effect, it has to be said. Okay, but I want to show you this, since we're on this. The other resource which I haven't showed you yet, which is the best one, and the one that you'll most enjoy, I think, is online. In Gaelic it's called Popur an Dúlchais, which means the well of tradition, and in Scots it's known as the Kist o' Riches, so the chest of riches. And this is a digitisation of pretty much all the recordings ever made by the School of Scottish Studies. It contains 34,000 oral recordings. So in the past, you would have had to go to the School of Scottish Studies and ask for one of these big sort of reel-to-reel tapes to be pulled, lifted out, and you'd have to write down what it was that you were listening to. Now, it's all there. Which means, again, that you have the vast resources of the School of Scottish Studies at your fingertips for exploration. So whatever topic we're looking at over the next few weeks, search for it in the Kistoriches or Tobrandolchish, and you'll find recordings. And you'll find the actual recording. So it's not just somebody saying that such and such person said such and such. You'll actually find the person from the croft on Unst or the croft in Barra telling you the story. Now, the ones in Gaelic, of course, if you don't have Gaelic, it's a bit of a problem, but they do have a summary of what the person's saying associated with it. And if the Shetland one, you'll also have a problem because it's very strong dialect that you're hearing, but you will get the summary and you'll tune your ear. And you can search for topics as well, so you can search for, let's see, what we search for. There you go, information, all the recordings about whaling, because whaling was a very important event, thing that people in Lewis, Orkney and Shetland, the men, that's a very important thing that they did in the 19th century and into the 20th century. The 19th century was on the Arctic whaling, 20th century it was the Antarctic whaling. But you'll get lots of stuff there, whaling songs, stories about all sorts of stuff. There's actually a story about a man from Yell who was told that if he could walk across the back of a polar bear that was still alive, he would get special powers. And despite what you might think, I'm sure you're imagining what happened to him. He did actually manage to walk across the back of this polar bear and did get magical powers, and was regarded when he got back to Yell as a man who could cure various things and could do various things because of this particular power that he had acquired. So I think I'm going to bring it to an end here because I'm going to be lecturing again in 10 minutes' time on the modern history of Orkney and Shetland. So I need to go and look at some latrinalia and also have a cup of tea. So there's the thing to get out of this today is read the notes, see what folklore is, and this what traditional custom and belief is. Bring back some comments and some questions. There's some rude folklore in the notes as well, so that should amuse you, because folklore can be quite earthy. That's part of its not all of it, but some of it is, because it's to do with the very basicness of human life. Have a look at the PowerPoint, but also start exploring some of these resources. Either look at the JSTOR stuff and come back with a paper that you might have had a look at from Biologius, or come back with one of the recordings that you found that's particularly whetted your interest, and we'll have a little chat about that. And then after we've done that, next week we'll have a look at what we're looking at. Magical thinking. But as I say, before I start blithering magical thinking next week, you come with your contribution so that you've had something that you've enjoyed looking at, so that you're interacting and not just listening to me, because nearly 2 hours of just listening to me is hard work. So it would be good to hear from you. So as I say, we'll draw that to a close just now. And any questions you've got, bring them next week. And if you've got any topics you'd like to discuss on the discussion board as well, drop me a line and we'll put that on the discussion board. So, there we go. So, farewell people, and I'll see you soon. And I'll see some of you in 10 minutes' time.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Okay then.
Thanks.
All the best now.
Bye.
Bye.